May I now please invite Mr. Sreeji Gopinathan ji, founder and CEO, SKG Advisory, for his keynote address on Corporate Digital Responsibility Framework. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Gopinathan brings over 20 years of significant domain expertise and global experience. Before this, he was the Chief Information Officer at Lupin Limited and led to end-to-end IT and digital portfolio of the company. He has also been associated with companies like Philips, Procter & Gamble, ISRO and ABB. सर आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत करते हैं और आपसे निवेदन करते हैं आप आएँ और सभा को संबोधित करें. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Mr. Sreeji Gopinathan ji, founder and CEO, SKG Advisory.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Samir, for inviting me, Dr. Gushran, for inviting me to present this important topic. Digitalization and digital transformation has gathered steam in terms of people talking about it a lot more in the recent past. To be precise, probably post-pandemic, this has gathered a lot of steam in the private and public world. Doesn't mean that digitalization and digital transformation was not going on before that. I've been working in the corporate sector for actually more than 3 decades now, worked in other parts of the world, and then I've come back here. It is happening in different forms and shape. It has been happening in different forms and shape across the corporate world as well as the public sector. So, does that mean that now that we are talking about corporate digital responsibility, does that mean that it was done irresponsibly in the past? I don't think so. Yeah, I think there have been certain parameters which was always under consideration on how to do business, how to digitize, how to create minimum impact due to that. However, if you look at the curve, there has been an exponential pickup in terms of digitizing not just a user in an organization or a public system, but also the industrial setups. So if you go to a pharma company or a FMCG company or an oil and gas company, the digitization in the past has been very isolated because the machine does the job and the production happens and the output comes. But now there is digitization happening in the industrial sector as well, which is increasing the landscape and the surface area of digitization. And the digital transformation then happens because of the quantum of data that is being generated out of all the digitalization that is happening. But even today, we are still scratching the surface, not just in India, I think globally as well. There are very, very few top organizations who have probably gone deeper into that to create insights and data value out of it. But in India, in the last 3-4 years, it has actually gathered steam, and probably there is a trajectory that we are seeing in India which can catapult us to a different level compared to the global scenario. So given that, it is very important that that catapulting does not result in dire consequences for the planet and for the people. What that means is, there is a lot of data centers being generated. There's a lot of sensorization that is happening. Artificial intelligence and the generative component of artificial intelligence requires significant storage compute behind the scenes to generate the output that it is supposed to generate. We all now are very conversant with ChatGPTs of the world. We use ChatGPT for everything that we need in life. Kids are using that for schoolwork, but actually the compute that happens behind is actually pretty significant. It results in consumption of a lot of factors, technical and non-technical. So hence, the call for being more responsible from a corporate, we're calling it corporate, but also public sector, it is very, very important. A lot of research has gone into this by the SKOCH Group and task forces that has been created from public and private sector. A lot of discussions has happened, brainstorming has happened, and what is being presented now is an outcome of that. Now, there are certain frameworks that is existing in certain countries, but there is nothing comprehensive anywhere. So there are about 7 countries that were taken from across the globe to study what is out there, and how can we create a framework which probably is going to be ahead of the game. Now, when this becomes already, as we heard, ESG has become mandatory for people investing in certain companies or buying from certain companies. There will come a time when if we are not doing digital transformation in a responsible manner and we don't have the indices in our favor, probably our organizations may not get the businesses that they're getting now from a global scenario, and probably within the country as well. Hence, this work that has been done is very important, so that it helps the corporate world, the leadership and the organization to take a look at it as a guidance factor for now, and probably it becomes a mandatory regulatory point in the future, and hence we need to be staying ahead of the game. So this is a master set that you will see. Those are the 12 big components which has been created as a master set for corporate digital responsibility. First and foremost, of course, all of us are throwing our data, private data, into the digital world out there. How secure is it? A consumer data or a patient data or a distributor data or a retailer data, all of that data has a significance in one way or another, which needs to be taken care of in an appropriate, secure manner. That's the number one factor which has to be considered. Then there is a social aspect to it. We all are worried whether AI is going to replace jobs. Is it going to replace employment which is there, and all the aspects then that can result from a social disruption point of view. That's the second aspect. We will go into the details in subsequent slides. And then comes the sustainability part. So for example, the foundation for all of this compute that happens is the data center. Whether we call it a cloud or a on-prem data center, underlying infrastructure and the consumption of power and other aspects related to that is very similar. So hence there is a sustainability factor that needs to be considered. Today in India, almost all real estate companies who has land and buildings is trying to becoming a data center company as well. So it's going to be a proliferation that's going to happen. It's driven by demand, of course, but how do we do this responsibly? It also has an impact from an economic point of view. It can debalance the setup and the equation in the economic setup. So how do we make sure that it does not disrupt in such a way that it puts everything in disarray? So that's the economic digital responsibility. And technology itself is a core component of it, meaning there are technologies which can actually help us do this in a much more responsible way. But maybe there are other technologies which will give you the same outcome but may not be done in a responsible way. Yeah? So that's the technology component of it. Now when you do all of that, you actually start maintaining a risk register for your corporate setup as well as the ecosystem around that. Now corporate is not an isolated setup anymore. There is a supply chain ahead of you and supply chain after you. So you have to consider the entire value chain when you do this. People, human resources is another aspect. And when things happen because of whatever you are doing as is a product that you're selling, you're getting consumers consume it, but then there could be issues that could happen there, right? Now, how do you then address that in terms of the grievances that come out from the public or the consumers that we have? Of course, ethical practices has to be core in this. We can achieve outcomes through multiple paths, multiple ways of working, but if ethics is not in the core of it, probably it's not going to last in terms of how the businesses are running. Government practices has to be given serious consideration in the corporate digital responsibility as well. So it has to have that Venn diagram where everything comes together. What is it that we do which has no impact from a government point of view? What is it that we have to give serious consideration from that point of view as well? And then we are a diverse country, multi-language. If we have to include the entire population, then there has to be multi-language. And at the end of the day, we all know that digitization is creating a lot of stress. We have the doctor here from AIMS. He will tell you how much of a mental health pandemic is out there because of the digitization. Any time that we are not talking to somebody, we are on the phone, or we are using some kind of digital consumption, and it is having a very, very serious consequence. Kids are not getting out there, doing things that we probably did when we were young. I know there are very young people here as well, but it's actually creating a lot of issue from a mental health point of view. So those are the 12 buckets which is important from a corporate digital responsibility point of view. I will quickly go through the sub points. We may not have time to go through each of those in detail. So from a security point of view, as I said, the data itself that is getting generated, how that is stored, when it is moving, how that is taken care of. Attackers know that when it is stored, probably most organizations have taken the steps to encrypt it and to make sure that it is having multiple levels of security before the attacker can reach it. But when the data goes from one location to another, that is highly vulnerable. Now, how do you protect that as well? So both are important. Breaches, a lot of organizations get ransomware attacks now. Now, some entities say, I have all the backups in place, or even if it happens, I can restore it. But what if the attacker, and actually the attacker is in the ecosystem for, on average, more than a year before they actually attack you? So that means they have seen your data, they have mapped your servers, mapped your systems, they have probably infiltrated the data out of your ecosystem as well. So even if you are able to restore your systems, the data is probably gone into the wrong hands already. So breaches has a dire consequence because of that. So I'm not going to explain all of those. Yeah, but cybersecurity, hidden criminal activity, this also is a very important point, not just from outside players, but also from inside players. There are insider threat in an organization is a menace. Disgruntled employees, existing employees, or probably somebody who has left, who has been doing a critical job, probably a server administration person who has left the organization. He knows too much as far as that organization is concerned. Copyrights, patent protection, IP protection. How do you do innovation? Do you do innovation at any cost, or do you do that in a responsible manner? And data privacy and data responsibility. Now we know that economies like EU has very stringent data privacy regulations like GDPR. In the US there is California Act. India has now the DPDP Act, which is out there, not fully enforced, but it's a pretty comprehensive one which sort of balances the right of individuals and the right of legal system. So there is a good balance that is being achieved there. So India is actually moving ahead quite well, but the corporate world has to really take this very seriously. Moving on to the social digital responsibility. Once you as an entity has collected data, whoever you are collecting it, as a pharma you do lot of clinical trials. A beauty company will do a lot of tests for their creams or whatever. You take any organization, you are collecting data of your consumers, patients, people, surveys. All of that is sitting in your ecosystem. How are you going to deal with that in a responsible manner? And also there are different points there. There is social impact. There is disclosures. You're as per the act, as per the regulation now, as a data fiduciary. That's what the technical term is. You are liable to disclose to the owner of the data, which is you and me, where the data is, what are you using the data for, how are you processing it, have you outsourced it to somebody else to process it, then what are the controls for that outsourcing party? All those needs to be disclosed. Accountability of the data, and addressing the digital poverty. This is an interesting one. There is a large divide in the digital world as well. People who do not know what they are giving the data for, how it's going to be used, etc. It's a very important thing. I hear my maid getting calls, and she just gives the data, and I overhear and I said, who did you give that data to now? And call आया था इधर से बोला वो बोला ये बोला मैंने दे दिया. This is a significant issue if you really think about it, and that's where they know they are vulnerable and hence they go after them. Inclusive products, diversity and skill enhancement. So that's the social digital responsible aspects. Again, this is a overarching framework which forms a guideline. Some of it might be applicable for certain organizations. Yeah. And then we have the sustainable aspect. So again, carbon neutrality, e-waste, power consumption, efficiency, zero waste, sustainable web design. How many people know that there is a way that you can create a website in a responsible manner? If you do not do that properly, it is actually creating a negative impact from a sustainability point of view. Many organizations probably are not even aware of that. They outsource it to a small little player who can just put together a website without following the standards. Renewable energy, gas emissions, and water consumption. Economic, again, it's all about equity, fair income, and how AI and database decision making possibly can create negative impact in the economic situation of people, and enabling the individual monetization. Sorry, I'm going to speed up a bit because I've been told time is running out. Technology, as I said, is another area where we have to be very careful in what kind of technology we choose, which kind of partners do we use, what kind of methodologies that we use, what kind of precautions have been taken by different players in your technology value chain, so on and so forth. With outsourcing, there are multiple layers of parties that play in your ecosystem. You actually don't know who is actually doing the work at the end of the day. Risk management. There is a significant risk when you use digital world. You should know what to do, what not to do. In an organization, the biggest issue is phishing and wishing, where people try to send emails to you with a link. You click on it, you don't know what you have done. You have given an entry of an attacker in your organization. Similarly, in our personal world as well, right? We use the phones, we get SMS, we get WhatsApp. Before clicking on anything, before going to a website, think twice, thrice, is this something that I need to do? Even if you got a message from your bank, don't click on the link that has come. You go to your official website and find where it is, and then see whether it is a valid thing. All those kind of practices are very important. Content moderation is another one. And then fraud detection and prevention. There's a lot of fraud that happens in this world, so organizations have to make sure that they put mechanisms in place to detect fraud proactively, not reactively. Reactively doesn't help because a fraud has already happened. And there are mechanisms that we can do that using technology these days. Reputational risk, huge issue there. Human resources, inclusion, education, and capacity building. I think Samir already talked about it, a very significant aspect. Grievance redressal. When there are issues, there has to be a formal mechanism to collect those issues, hear out the people, and then not just store it, but actually do something about it. So the employee feedback, public feedback, redressal and monitoring, and database decision making will be very important to address the grievances. Ethical practice, I think it is self-explanatory. Digital ethics, iterative processes, and ethical design of digital products. So again, you take the approach of what is essential to be done, do that. What is essential to be collected, collect it. If you do not need that data, do not take it. So if somebody is doing a medical research, you only need the blood data or the vital data. You don't need the rest of the data that is being collected. So why is an organization collecting that? Because data is powerful. Government practices. There has to be, the DPDP Act is where this is coming up, and there are other supporting acts under that as well. Consent management. Without my consent, my data cannot be collected, then cannot be processed, cannot be given to somebody else. So I have to give the consent, and I also have the right to remove the consent after 2 years, 3 years, whenever I want. And then the organization has to make sure the data is removed unless it is essential to be stored for a legal requirement, because something else is going on as far as that individual is concerned. Misinformation and harmful content, we all know what that is. We face that on a daily basis in our daily life. Multi-language, if we have to include, we have to consider people who cannot speak English or Hindi maybe. In the South, Hindi also will not work. English doesn't work beyond a certain layer of the organization. The local language inclusion is very important in this. Mental health, I don't know how much I can emphasize that this is, even though it is the 12th one, probably it's one of the most important one. We are not realizing how much of an impact that this can have in our next generation. Already seeing my generation people suffering from the repercussions of what is happening in this field. In the corporate world also it is happening, in the personal life also it is happening. So we need to take this very, very seriously. Organizations have to have employee assistance programs, creating awareness programs, counseling sessions, good work environment, and monitoring and adjustment. It has to be an iterative process. So that's what it is. This is a guidance, this is a framework for organizations to adopt and make sure that they are looking at this from a responsible manner, so that you are not falling behind when probably this becomes a regulation or an expectation or a mandate for doing business. Thank you very much.